Baltic. Zok the Gemara, Omar Rab. And that takes us to the next daf. Okay, here again. Omar Rabba. I have to get the right daf up. Again. Here we go. Aleph. Let me share it. Share. Oh, okay, so now you should be able to see the daf. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, Shama Mixas Kia Babor. And Rashi tells us there was an interesting thing that happened. Rashi says that at this point, what we think happened is that the Hachikamer, this person that we're talking about, Reuben, was standing at the edge of the bar. And the person in the bar was blowing, and his friend was blowing in the bar. The person blowing the shofar was in the bar when he started, and he was walking out of the bar as he's blowing. Right? And the halacha is, Zok the Gamora, Yotza, he'll be Yotza. Meaning that even though the first half of the Tkiyah was in the bar and it was an echo, but when he came out of the bar, the Tkiyah was clear, and for the second half of the Tkiyah, he was Yotza. Dr. Gamora. 1 second. So Dr. Gamora. What happens if it's mixes Tkiyah Kaidin Shalom Rashach? What if the Baltcheya started blowing before Alois, so before there's a mitzvah of Tkiyah Shofar, before the Chiyuv is, because it's not in the day, and he finished up, it straddled Alois Shachar. Mixes Tkiyah Lachai Shalom Rashach. The halacha is lo yotza. He's not yotza. Omer lo Abai. So Abai asked, Maish nahasam, what's the difference by before and after Alois Shachar? The be'ina kula kia b'chiyuva, you need the entire kia to be done at a time where there's a chiyuv kia v'leka hachanami here too be'ina kula kia b'chiyuva v'leka. You need the whole kia to be b'chiyuva, and he's not yotze when it's in the bar. So why a half a kia from the bar is good, yet a half a kia before and after Alois is not good? There's a huge difference. At night, it's not a chiyuv to blow shofar. So he's blowing shofar totally at the wrong time. The fact that you're in a bar doesn't make it not a makam chiyuv. Sure, people outside the bar who are going to hear an echo, they're not going to hear it well. But the people inside the bar who hear the direct kiyah, for them it's a perfect kiyah. So therefore, it's not a problem having a half a tkiyah that's not good. Zok to Gamora. You see from here, remember the Sava Rabba, Shama saved tkiyah, below tchilas tkiyah yotza. This fellow outside the bar, the first half of the tkiyah couldn't hear properly. Second half of the tkiyah heard fine because by that time the person got out of the bar. You're still yotza. Umamela, if you can hear the second half of the tkiyah be yotza, tchilas tkiyah below saved tkiyah yotza. If you heard the first half of the tkiyah and not the second half of the Kiyah, you're also going to be Yotze. So this is basically the same Gamora that we had in Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. We have a Makor that a half of the Kiyah is enough. And just like on Chav Zayin, the Gamora slugged it up, the Gamora is going to slug it up here as well. Tashma, the exactly same rayas that the Gamora brought on Chav Zayin. Taka B'Rishon, Umashach B'Shniyah Kishtay. At the end of the first set, Kiyah Shvarm Truat Kiyah, that Kiyah, after the first set, you blew very long so that you can use it for the first key of the second set. So the halacha is ein biyadi alachas. You only have one key, and you're going to have to blow another key to start the next set. Correct Gamor v'amai. Tisalakla b'tarte Why don't you use it for two? It's a very long tkiya. You only need to hear half of the tkiya. So if you only need to hear the half of the tkiya, so why can't you use that for both tkiyas? That's the Gemara's question. And for the Gemara, the answer is pashut, because psuke tkiya mehadodi like paskina. You don't split a tkiya in half. You cannot split a tkiya in half, and since you cannot split a tkiya in half, that's why it can't be used for two tkiyas. So therefore, it doesn't work. But you don't have a rye from here that a half a tkiya is not good. But a half a tkiya would be perfect. The whole problem here is that you can't split one tkiya in half. Okay. Toshma. You either blew into a bar, which is a pit below the surface of the earth. Dos is a pit above the surface of the earth. Or pit is into a bara. So the echo bounces back at you. In Koil Shofar Shama, if you heard the voice of the shofar, yotza. In Koil Havara Shama, but if you just heard echo, lo yotza, you're not yotza. Fact more v'amai. Before you heard the echo, there was a stretch of pure, clear tkiyas. V'amai lebik b'tchilas tkiya. Why can't you be yotza with the pure tkiya you heard? Mekamed ela arvav kal. Before the echo got mixed in. If a half a tkiya is good, that half a tkiya should be enough. Zok to Gamora. Hika Amar Rabba So we're now backing away from the story that we said. Till now we said that hearing a half of tkiya is good. Now we're saying no, that's not what Rabba meant. So we slugged it up. And about the half of tkiya is not good. So all the previous kashas are no longer fair. What's the case of Rabba? Rabba's talking about the guy himself. If he starts off blowing the shofar in the bar, and as he's blowing shofar, he gets out of the bar, so he heard the right shofar the whole time. So he's yotza. Right, the Gemara, that's a hiddush. Yihachi ma'ila memra. But tell me a chiddush that if a fellow is blowing the shofar, and as he's blowing it in the bar, he walks out of the bar, he's yotza. Why not? He's hearing perfect shofar. So Gemara, I'll tell you why Rabbah needed to say this. Mao de teme zinin de mapik reishe va'akati shofar babar. Maybe while he's climbing out of the bar, his head is pointed down. So the shofar would be blowing into the bar, but his head would be out of the bar. And then he's hearing an echo of his own kiyah shofar. The kamar of kalam. And then it's not a good, pure kiyah. And therefore he shouldn't be yotza. Kamash malon, that we're not choshet for that, and the person will be yotza himself if he blew the shofar and stepped out of the bar as he was blowing shofar. Omer Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said, B'shofar shel oila. Let's say you had an oila. Now, an oila, once you are makriv, it's a murim on the mizbeach. Once you burn the oila, the bones, the hide is all chula. However, while the animal is still alive, it's kosher. So, Zok Rabbi Yehuda, if you cut off the shofar of an oila alive animal, it's kosher. Lo yiska, you should not blow with it. Vim taka, if you blew b'shoigeg, there's a lach of me'ila, and if you have a noah from hekish b'shoigeg, it's yotza l'chula. And therefore yotza, because since it was yotza l'chula, so you blew with chula. But if you blew b'mezid, Toshva says, then there's no din me'ila, and it would remain kosher, and therefore you wouldn't be yotza, because you can't be yotza with kosher. What about the shofar shel shlom? Now, a shlom is different, because the shlomim remains mammon gavoya the whole time until after they murmur brought, and therefore it's not subject to me'ila. So therefore, lo yiske, you cannot blow with the shofar of a shlomim. And if you blew, you wouldn't be yotza, because you can't have enough of it. My time, what's the difference between an oil and the shlomim? Oil bas me'ilahi. Oil is bas me'ilah. It's subject to the halachas of me'ilah. So if you use it b'shogeg, even the molba, once you were moil, you had a no from the shofar, nafkala l'chulim. It goes l'chulim. So therefore, you could be yotza the mitzvah. But shlomim, the lab b'nei me'ilah, shlomim, which is not subject to the halachas of me'ilah, yisura hu derachav b'hu v'lenaf l'chulim. It remains usher and doesn't go l'chulim, and therefore you can't be yotza. Right, Rava, this makes no sense at all. Maskav l'Rava, ema small. When you use the oila, the shofar of the oila. So when are you moil? L'basar the taka. After you blew it, so you had enough of it. Now it's moil, and now it goes l'chulin. But you first have to have enough of it before it went l'chulin. So kika taka, b'yisur taka. Yeah, after you blew the shofar, it goes l'chulin. But while you blew the shofar, it didn't go l'chulin yet. So how could you say that you're yotze? Elo amarava. No matter b'shogeg with mezid, shlomim, oila, you're not yotze if you blow the shofar. But Hadar Amar, then Rabbi changed his mind and said, Echad Zev, Echad Yotza. You know why? Because mitzvahs, lav, lehenis nitnu. You don't have enough from a mitzvah. So therefore, there's no problem with using hektish, using an oila, using a shlomin to be mekayim the mitzvah of shofar, because it's not called anah. So you're not called having anah from the oila. And therefore, there's no problem whatsoever of being yotza. And Rashi says, lav lehenis nitnu, li Yisrael, li kiyumam lehem anah. The mitzvah isn't made for us to derive pleasure from. Mitzvahs are a yoke on our shoulders to carry. It's a burden. That's a mitzvah. And therefore, there's no problem with using Isurei Hana to do a mitzvah. And therefore, no matter what, you'll be yoitza with the oil, with the shalom, it doesn't matter. Amar Yehuda. If Yehuda said, the shofar shall buy desire. What about a shofar when a buy desire? Lo yiskalach atchila. But v'mtaka yotza, once again, because it's not called having a no. Mitzvahs lav lehenis. However, the exception is b'shofar shal ir hanidachas. If you have a shofar of hanidachas, there lo yiskeh. Why? Because it's also banal, but it's also destined to be burnt, because the Torah tells us that everything in an ir hanidachas has to be burnt. And therefore, v'mtaka lo yotza. And therefore, if you blew the shofar of an ir hanidachas, you won't be yotza. You know why? My timer, ir hanidachas kitusei michtash yurei. We look at it if it's a burnt, so you don't have there's no shofar here. And we learned on Daf Chav Zayin that a shofar has to have a minimum size, big enough that if you hold it, it sticks out a little bit on either side of your hand. But if it's considered burnt, there's nothing there. And therefore, it's not a problem of having a no, that's not the issue. The issue is you don't have a shofar. And therefore, you're not.
Well, man, I understood that it was before it was burnt. It was possible.
Yeah, even before it's burnt, we consider it burnt. So let's look at Rashi. So we see Rashi's wording. The whole is shreifakah. The shofar is destined to be burnt. Anything that's destined to be burnt, we already consider it now pre-burnt. The shofar by shir. The shofar needs to have a minimum shir. So the problem is you don't have big enough of a shofar because it's considered closed.
Do shofars burn? Is it flammable?
Anything, I would assume that anything organic could burn.
Bones burn?
Yeah, for sure bones burn.
That's what it is.
Yeah, bones for sure burn. Yeah, bones burn. If you ever made a barbecue, sure bones burn. You ever left a steak on the fire too much, it burns to a crisp.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's do the Hela Gemara weiter. So now the Gamora is going to get into the sugya of mitzvahs lav lehenis nitnu, which is a fascinating sugya in and of itself. Amar Hamudur hano mechaver. If somebody pledges not to have enough from his friend, or his friend asked him from having enough, so this person Reuben is not allowed to have enough from Shimon. Nevertheless, muter l'skoyer loy kishol mitzvah. Shimon could still blow shofar for him once again because mitzvahs lav lehenis nitnu. Okay. How about Hamudar no shofar? What if I said I'm not going to have enough of my shofar? You're allowed to blow that shofar, and you're allowed to blow the shofar to be yotzei mitzvah. Once again, because it's not called that you're having enough from the shofar because you're being yotzei mitzvah through it. What if Reuven may not have enough from Shimon? Mazal of mechatos. Shimon's allowed to spritz. If Reuven's tummy, Shimon's allowed to spritz the mayim of the paraduma on Reuven. Only in the winter where nobody's going to go to cool off. Nobody's interested in getting sprayed. No one's going to a sprinkler in the winter. In the summer, he wouldn't be able to spritz the Meipar Aduma on Reuven because Reuven's having, besides the tahir that he's having he's getting a cool spray, a cool shower, and that's also for him. Hamudur ano mima'in. What if someone says, I am not going to have ano from the Arizal's mikveh in the Tzvas Beis Ha'olam? The law is if you go there in the winter and it's freezing cold, you're allowed to go into that freezing cold mikveh. But after a long day going through the tzvas Beis Ha'olam, going to all the gedolim, you're sweaty, you're hot, and you tell your wife, give me a minute, I want to go into the mikveh, and you go and you cool off and you come out all refreshed, that's not going to be allowed because they're having hana, you're cooling off and you're fresh, while your wife is waiting on the path, sweating in the heat of the sun. Granted, it costed you 50 shekel to get a small towel the size of a napkin, but that's how it goes in Israel. Talk to Gamora about it. They sent to Avud Shmuel. What if they forced somebody? They forced him to eat matzah. Yosy, you're Yosy. So you're Yosy, even though you didn't have kavana to be Yosy the mitzvah. So now we're getting into the sugya of mitzvahs trichas kavana. Who forced this person to eat the matzah that we're talking about? He laid a kafay shade. If it means a shade forced him, which means someone has funny voices in his head. Well, Tanya, we learned, itim cholam, itim shoyte. If a person is sometimes sane and sometimes he's insane, kishu cholam, while he's thinking lucid and while he's sane, hareu kipikeich l'chol dvorav. He's like a pikeich, he's mechuyev in all mitzvahs. But kishu shoyte, when the voices in his head are telling him things, like the kafay shade, hareu kishoyte l'chol dvorav. He's considered a shoyte, he's part of the mitzvahs. So how could you say that kafay shade you'd be yoytze the mitzvah of matzah if at that time he's not even mechuyev the mitzvah of matzah? We consider him a shoyte during that period of time. Amar Abashi, that's not pshat. The kafay that the Brisa says your yoytze is not a shade. It's a kaful parsiyim. Goyim came and forced matzah down his throat. He didn't want to eat it. They forced it down his throat. Nevertheless, he's still yoytze. Mitzvah ain't shvichas kavana. Amar Rava says from this halacha that Rabashi is telling us in the Brisa that if you force someone to eat matzah, he's yoytze. I could stretch it further, and I can tell you, if someone blows a shofar, but he's not blowing it to be yoytze the mitzvah shofar, he's blowing it because he likes to hear the music of the shofar. He's still yoytze for the same reason. Mitzvahs and shvichas kavana. Why do I need Rava to add this? Mitzvahs and shvichas kavana. I would know it. What type of Rava needs to speak out to kaya l'shir is yoytze. So tomorrow very possible. Now the tema hasam echol matzah omer echmana v'acha. By matzah you're yoytze because the Torah said eat matzah and you ate it. And Rashi explains beautifully. There's a halacha when it comes to isurim. If you're misasik in the isur, what if you turn around and you knock the light in your house on Shabbos and it turns the light on? There's no chiv. There's not even a shayk. It's called misasik. You're puttering on. But there's two exceptions to the Torah of misasik. Misasik b'chalovim. If your caleb fell into your mouth and you swallowed it, or like every rape defense in court, if someone says, I just fell on this woman and it just happened, there you're chayiv. I'll show you. You know why? So the last line in Rashi, because you had to know. So it makes sense to say, just like misasik, you'll be chayiv achatos for something that you have enough from. So too, when it comes to mitzvah shvichas kavana, it makes sense to say that since you're having enough from it, it's going into you, therefore you'll be mekayim the mitzvah, even though you didn't have kavana. But shofar, and allow me to change the omid. Aval shofar. 1 second. Okay, hopefully you can see it. Aval hacha by a shofar. Different truksa. It's merely a zichron trua. There's nothing you're ingesting. So therefore, it would be like misasik. By misasik ba'olum. It's really misasik. It's not something that's going inside you. So maybe that wouldn't be considered a mitzvah if you didn't have kavanah. A mashalon that even for something like shofar, which if it was an ister, you wouldn't be mechuyev al misasik because there's no nehena. A mashalon that you're still yoytze the mitzvah even without kavanah. Alma kasava Rava, just in case nobody noticed, because it was very subtle. You see from here, the Rava holds mitzvahs ein shvichas kavana. You don't need to have kavana to be yoytze mitzvah. Correct Gamora, Esvei. I'm going to prove to you that mitzvahs do need kavana, because it says somebody was reading the Torah, Zman hamikra, and he reached Krishma. So the question is, if he reads the Krishma as he's reading the Torah, will he be mekayim the mitzvah of Krishma? Zokted Brisa, im kiven liba yotze. If he had kavanah to be yotze, then he's going to be yotze in the mitzvah of Krishma. Im lav lo yotze. So my love, what does kavanah mean? Kiven liba yotze. So you have a raya from here that you're only mekayim the mitzvah of Krishma. You have kavanah to be yotze. So you have a chlor raya, the mitzvah of Krishma. mitzvah strichas kavana, which is shver on Rava. And the Gemara loy. It doesn't mean you're keeping libra lotzes. Avada, you don't have to have kavana lotzes. It's likros. If you had kavana to read, then he's yoytza. In fact, more likros, hakakari. That's exactly what he's doing. He's reading. What do you mean he has kavana to read? He is reading. So Gemara, no. The kair lahagia. He's not reading it normally. He's reading it because he wants to make sure that it was written properly. He's checking the Sefer Torah. And when a person reads that way, he normally doesn't pronounce words the way they're pronounced. He pronounces them based on each letter the way they're written. So sometimes he's not even reading it properly. So on that, the Gemara says, if you were being Magia Torah, you were checking it to make sure it's good. And you reached Krishma, and you especially there said the words properly, then you'll be Yoitza Krishma, even if you don't come on to be Yoitza, because we can still hold like Rava, that mitzvahs ain't shvichas kavana. A person, this is our mission, a person was walking behind the basic or his house was near the basic and he heard the sound of the shofar, or the sound of the Megillah. If he had kavan to be my law for Gamora. So once again, you see that mitzvah strichas kavan. You have kavan to listen. You have kavan to listen. He heard. That's the case in the Brisa. That's the case in the Mishnah. He heard them laning the Megillah. He heard them blowing shofar. Dr. Gamora, no, Sover Chamor B'Omahu. Now this could be offensive to a Baal Tekeya. It could be offensive to a Baal Koyer who lays the Megillah. But if he just heard noises, it could be just a donkey making noise. But if he listened carefully, he was kavan to listen to realize that it's a Kiyah Shofar, that's a Megillah, then it'll be Yotza. But Avada, you don't need mitzvah shvichas kavana, you just need to know that someone's reading or someone's blowing the shofar. Not a bullet dodged. So now we'll have another kasha on the Rava who says mitzvah and shvichas kavana. Eighth, nischaven shomeya v'lo nischaven mashmiya. Someone, Reuben blew the shofar, and Shimon heard the shofar. So what if Shimon had kavana to be Yotza the mitzvah shofar, but v'lo nischaven mashmiya? But Reuben didn't have kavana to be mitzvah. Or mashmiya v'lo nischaven shemeya. Or the mashmiya had kavana, but the shemeya did not have kavana. So the law is lo yotza achi yischaven shemeya umashmiya. You're not yotza unless both the shemeya has kavana to be yotza and the mashmiya has kavana to be mitzvah. I understand in a case where the mashmiya had kavana, but the shemeya didn't have kavana. What's the case? You could say it's not shvichas kavana. It's not a right shvichas kavana. You could say what we said earlier. Kisover chamor ba'omahu. The kavana that the shemeya has to have is not to be yotza. He just has to focus to know that it's actually someone laning the Megillah, that it's actually someone blowing shofar. What is that case? How is it possible to have a case where the mashmiya did not kavana? Lav b'tekel ashir. There must be a case where he blew the shofar, not for the mitzvah shofar, but he blew just because he wanted to blow the shofar and hear the music. Yet the Brisa says that if it was loin ischaven mashmiya, he's not yotze. So you have a right that tekel ashir is not yotze, which is exactly the opposite of what Rava said. So we know Dilma the Kaman Bech Nebuche. What he's doing when he's blowing, Rashi says, let's look at Rashi. Rashi is the Kaman Bech Nebuche, which is the fourth line from the top of the Gamora, from the top of the Amud on Rashi. The Eino Tekeh K'Shir Tkiya. He's not blowing enough to be a Shir Tkiya. And that's why he's not used. So when it says, Mashmiya, it means he didn't blow long enough. Correct Toysus, that makes no sense at all. And let's look at Toysus, the third Toysus on the Amid, the command of the Vuche. Pierce Bekutris, the Eino Tekea, Kishir Tkiya, Hamafush, Mishnah Senu. You didn't blow long enough. Correct Toysus, if that's what it's speaking about, he didn't blow long enough, because of them Kenya feel Nischaven Namila enough. Even if you had Kavana specifically to be Yotze, if you're not blowing the Tkiya properly, of course you're not Yotze. So who's talking about Kavana here? What impact does Kavana have if you didn't blow it properly? And here's a Toysus, from near Lee, that Manbech Lebuchi means Shein Mischaven L'Tkoya Shir Tkiya. His intention was to blow very short blasts, not long enough to be a Shir Tkiya. But by mistake, he took a Shir Tkiya, and he blew a Shir Tkiya. That's what command of Lebuchi. So if he didn't even have Kavanah to blow Shir Tkiya, then he's not Yotze. He has to have the kavanah to blow a shear tkiyah, but he doesn't have the kavanah to be Yotze. Zok Tosis, maybe that's what Rashi meant, because it's hard to agree that Rashi would say that we're talking about someone who didn't blow the shear, because for sure you're not Yotze. Zok to Gamora. Zok to Gamora Vayta. So now Abai takes it a step further. If you're going to hold that mitzvah lav shvichas kavanah, so what would happen? What if someone decided that he wants to sleep in the sukkah the 8th night, which is after sukkahs, but he didn't want to be yotzei the mitzvah? He was just sleeping there. He wanted to sleep in the sukkah. It was comfortable. But since mitzvah and shvichas kavanah, maybe this should be the issue about Tosef. You're lucky you should get malchus for being over about Tosef. You didn't have kavanah to be yotzei. You don't have to have kavanah to be yotzei. Omar loy. So Rav answered, Shani Omer mitzvahs einoi over alein ela bizmana. You can't be over about Tosef for the mitzvah of sukkah after sukkahs. You can only be over about Tosef during the period of time when there's a mitzvah to do something. But on the day after sukkahs, being in the sukkah cannot create an issur of Tosef. Mother Rav Shaman Bar Abba. Minayin l'koyin she'oila l'duchen. So we want to prove that you could be Yotze a mitzvah and be over Baal Tosef even after the time of the mitzvah. How do you know that if a kohen goes to duchen, a very generous kohen, he's going to duchen, and he wants to give more brachas than just the 3 brachas of Yivarecha and Yorash and Panavelecha and Yivarecha and Yor and Yisa. He wants to give more brachas, and he wanted. How do you know that a kohen who's going to duchen Shalom Yomar? He shouldn't say, since the Torah gave me Rishus and gave me a mitzvah to bench Yisrael, I want to give extra brachas. I want to add an extra bracha to going. Hashem alakeh avoseichem, Yosy aleichem tochem elef pamim, yivarach eschem, chashodim alachem. You want to give an extra bracha. Talmud Loimer loy seisifu ala dover. It's also it's an Israel Baal Tosef for the kohen to give an extra bracha. Correct the Gamora. If you're telling me that once the time of the mitzvah is over, you cannot be over loisaisiv, for hahacha in this case, where the kohen already duchen, even the barachle, once he already duchen, over leismane. So now his mitzvah is done. So the time for this kohen to duchen is over. Yet if he adds an extra bracha after that, the katani over. The brachas has to be over baltoisim. So you see a raya that you will be over baltoisim. So I the whole mitzvah and shvichas kavanah. If you slept in the sukkah on the 8th night, you should get malchus for baltoisim. Gamora, when do we say if a kohen added a bracha, he's over baltoisim? That's before he finished duchening. If he finished duchening, the time is over. But he didn't finish duchening. Correct Gamora about Tanya Sayim. But we learned a brayso that says that even when the kohen finished, if he adds a bracha, he's over baltoisim. So Gamora, that brayso doesn't mean he finished duchening completely. It means Sayim bracha achas. He finished the first bracha v'chuneko, and after v'chuneko he added a bracha because he's still in the middle of duchening. Correct Gamora, like you can't say that because Vatanya Sayim kol brachaisa. We have a brayso that says even if the kohen finished all of the brachas kayanim and only afterwards he added a bracha, he's still over baltoisim. So you see, even after the time of the mitzvah, you're over baltoisim. Gemara, that's not true. After Sukkot, the Zman is over. But when the kohen finishes duchening, the Zman for duchening isn't over yet. You know what? Shiny Yachal, even the Ilmis Rabbi Tzibur Achrina. If the kohen would run into a new tzibur who needed someone to duchen for them, Hadim Avarach, he could duchen again. Kula Yom is Manehu. We say the entire day that a kohen duchens is the time to duchen, even after he duchen, because he might have an opportunity to duchen again. Mashenkein. In the case of sukkah, if you slept in the sukkah on the 8th day, that's over. It's not as man, and therefore you won't be over Baal Tosef, even though mitzvahs lav shvichas.
Where our minig is to say shkoyach to the kohen after duchen,
Right.
And he says afterwards, brachem to you.
Right.
Is he adding a bracha?
I don't know if that's adding a bracha to duchening. A kohen's allowed to be friendly and wish if you meet a kohen in shul on a Monday morning, he's allowed to give you a bracha. So I don't know if that's part of the duchening. Here he wanted to specifically add it to his duchening.
Okay.
Let's think the Gamora says, "Uminat tamer." How do I know that since you could still do it again, it's considered it's considered a Zman. So Tosfos asks right away, what do you mean, how do you know? You have a brisa. The brisa of Aduchnin proves it. So the brisa of Aduchnin doesn't prove it as much. Because the brisa of Aduchnin, I understand why he's over about Tosfos, because the Kohen had no chiyuv whatsoever to give an extra bracha. And for no reason on his own, he decided to give an extra bracha. Maybe that's over about Tosfos. But the raya that the Gamora is going to bring is an even more subtle case, where you had no choice and you had to do this, yet you're still over about Tosfos. The Zman we learned. There's many karbonos that need one matan of dam, like Bechor and Meiser. There's one matan of dam on the Mizbeach. You have two Bechor karbonos that come mixed together. The blood of two Bechor karbonos come mixed together, or Bechor and Meiser. So what do? You take the mixed blood, Yinosnu matana achas. You just take from the mixed blood, you put one matana, and that dam that you put will be representative of both of the karbonos that were mixed together. How about matan dal do matan dal? How about if you had two karbonos that each carbon required 4 matanas of dam on the mizbeach? And Rashi gives us examples of such karbonos. Rashi is shlomim, asham, oila, and taida. So you had some of these karbonos that got mixed together. So again, you do the same thing. There's equal representation in this container of blood of all the karbonos that were mixed together. You know, you put 4 matanas on the mizbeach, and then each of these karbonos got their matan dal. But what happens if matan dal the matan nachas? What if an osham, the blood of an osham, got mixed in with the blood of a bechor? The bechor only needs 1, but the osham needs 4. What do? You do 1, or do you 4? Rabbi Lozer Eimer, you nosta b'matan dal. You do 4, because otherwise the osham's not going to have its 4. Rabbi Shua Eimer, you nosta b'matan nachas. You only do 1, because you're not allowed to be bal toisim. Amalei Rabbi Lezer, harei over al bal tigra. If you only use 1, you'll be over al bal tigra, because the osham needs 4, and you only have 1 matan dal. Amalei Rabbi Shua, harei over al bal toisim. If you're going to put 4, then you're going to do 4 on the bechor as well, and the bechor is only supposed to have 1 matan dal. So it's a catch-22. Amalei Rabbi Lezer, loy nemer bal toisif elok shubatzim. The only time there's an isur bal toisif is only if you have the dam of a bechor on its own. It's only supposed to have 1 matan, and you made 4 matanas, that's bal toisif. But here where it's mixed together, and you need to do the 4 matanas dam, because at asham, that wouldn't trigger a bal toisif. Rabbi Yeshua, loy nemer bal tigra elok shubatzim. I'll look at it from the opposite perspective. If you only put 1 matanas dam, it's not an avla that you didn't provide the proper matanas dam for the asham, because that would only be a problem if the asham blood was by itself. But when it's mixed together with the bechor that only allows 1, there wouldn't be an isur blessing. But Rabbi Shua has another good point. If you didn't put 4 matanas dam, only 1, you're over never. Avata bal tigra. Yutaka didn't spritz enough times the asham blood. But you did an avera, but it was an avera of shoval tas. You didn't do a physical action of isser. But if you're going to put 4 matas dam, which means you're going to be over bal toisef for the bechor, avartal bal toisef asisa ma'aser b'yadecha. There you are over an isser with a ma'aser b'yadayim. If you have to be over an isser, I'd rather you be over an isser of shoval tasev, not an isser of a ma'aser b'yadayim. So here you have a proof. Here you have a proof that even though the time is done, you're still over. In this case, even the moment you made the first matnas dam at a bechor, that's it. The time for the bechor is over. Yet everybody agrees there's an isur bal toisef. Once the time for the bechor is discharged, there should be no problem of bal toisef. Lav mishum, it must be the amrinon kivan the ilu misrami le buchar achvina. If another bechor would show up in the base of mikdash that day, hadar mazamine, he would have to make this riko for the next bechor as well. So kum techais kula yom izmane, all day long is the time for the bechor. So therefore, there's a problem of bal toisef. But going back to our original kasha on brother, but sleeping in the sukkah on day 8, which is totally not of the Zman, there won't be a problem of bal toisef. How do you prove from this case here that Rabbi Shua holds that it's considered Zman all day, and that's why you're over bal toisef? Maybe he has a different shita. Dilma Kachav Rabbi Shua, mitzvah is over aleihem afilu shalei b'zmanam. maybe he disagrees with the whole teretz of Rava before. Rava wanted to say the reason why there's no problem about Tosef sleeping in the second eighth day is because it's past the time. Well, maybe Rabbi Shua holds you'll be over even if it's past the time. Maybe he disagrees with Rava's shot in when you're over about Tosef. Dr. Gamora, Anan Hachi Kamrin. The reason why we're bringing this brisa about the dam mixed together is we're having a kasha on Rab Shammai. Rab Shammai bar Abba wanted to bring a raya that the Zman continues if you can bring things later. My time is Shavak Masnis in the Moshe in the brisa. He brought a raya from a brisa. What he should have done, he should have brought a raya from the Mishnah. So the Mishnah is the case that we just brought over here with the dam that got mixed together. Rab Shammai brought his raya from the kohen of Duchening. Now that's a brisa. This is a Mishnah. So the Gamora wants to know, why did Rab Shammai bring a raya from the brisa rather than bring a raya from our Mishnah? Why didn't Rab Shammai bring the raya from this brisa, from this Mishnah that we're quoting? So the Gamora, even the ilu mismarmin like buchra achrino boy mazamine kuliyem zmanehu. The reason why, Dr. Gamora, that Rab Shammai didn't bring a raya from the Mishnah is because the Mishnah, you have a svara that if you would have, if another Bechor would have showed up that day, the whole day is Zman. So therefore, you don't have a raya from here that even after the Zman is over, you can still be over Bal Tosef. Maybe the only reason why you could be over Bal Tosef in the case of the dam is because the time is never over. Because if another Bechor comes today, it's still the time to spritz the blood for the Bechor. Correct, Gamora, if you have such a teretz, well, Brisa Nami, on the Brisa that Rab Shammai brought, you have the same teretz, like we said. Even the Imis Rami Tzibur Achrina, if there's another group of people that we need to duchen for, Hodem Evorach, the Kohen will duchen again, so therefore Kula Yom is Mane. So the question again is, why did Rab Shammai decide to bring the raya from the case of the Kohen that Kula Yom is Mane, and not from the case of the blood getting mixed together? So Rab Shammai bar Abba, he says it's a very big difference. In the case of the Mishnah, which the blood got mixed together, if another Bechor comes, you absolutely must spritz. You can't not properly process a carbon that comes. So therefore, there it's mistaber to say Kuli Yaima is Manehu. But Halcha, in the case of the Kohen, Rab Shammai felt it's a better kash on Rav, because he boy mavarch, he boy leimavarch. The Kohen, once he duchens once, he's not muchayiv to duchen again. So maybe you would say that the whole day is not the time. So that's why Rab Shammai asked the kasha in the case of the Kohen and not for the Mishnah. Because in the case of the Kohen, there's more of a svara that the Zman for duchening isn't all day, since the Kohen is not muchayiv to duchen once he duchened once. The Gemara answered anyway that kol yom is manayu. But Rab Shammai wanted to ask a kasha from a case where it's less mistaber to say kol yoma zmanahu. Rava Amar, how will Rava for all of these things and not worry about anything? He says, forget this, that it's not the Zman. It doesn't matter if it's the Zman, it's not the Zman. I'll tell you the rules why there's no problem of Bal Tosef if you sleep in the sukkah on the 8th night. Yet there is a problem about Tosef when it comes to duchening. There is a problem about Tosef when it comes to Zrika. Lotzes loy boitavan. Rava said that I said mitzvahs like shrichas kavana. That's to be yotzeh. If you want to be yotzeh a mitzvah, you're yotzeh a mitzvah even if you did not kavan. And that's why if you blew a shofar for the music of it, you're still the kind of mitzvah. But lavar, to be over on Bal Tosef, there boy kavan. There you have to have the kavan to be yotzeh. And the svara is poshut because nobody wants to be over an affair. So therefore, the default is that if he doesn't want to be yotzeh, maybe he has beferish kavanah not to be yotzeh. Even if you have mitzvahs like shrichas kavanah, but if you have specific kavanah not to be yotzeh, you're not going to be yotzeh. So to be over Bal Tosef, you won't be over Bal Tosef unless you have specific kavanah to be yotzeh. If there's no isser, it's just trying to be yotzeh, I hold mitzvahs like shrichas kavanah. But if if it's a child being over Baal Tosef, you're only over Baal Tosef if you specifically have kavanah to be Mekayim the mitzvah. Correct, Gamora, how can you say that? For Matan Domim, Rabbi Yeshua, the Lavar, Matan Domim, according to Rabbi Yeshua, there's a child of Baal Tosef, and you don't need kavanah, because when he's spritzing the blood, he only wants to spritz the blood of the Osham. He doesn't want to spritz the blood of the Bechor. So he does not kavanah to be Yosy the mitzvah. So why did Yeshua say you're over Baal Tosef? Rava, we have to make a third category. To be Yosy mitzvah, you don't need to have kavanah. Labor bismana, to be over the mitzvah while it's during the Zman of the carbon, such as during the day where you could still have another Bechor come. Also, you'll be over Baal Tosef without kavanah. But shaloi bismana. But on day 8, if you want to sleep in the sukkah, there boy kavanah, you will not be over Baal Tosef unless you had specific kavanah to be Mekai in the mitzvah. Beautiful. Reb Zera told his shamas. Let me change the dot. Second. Reb Zera told the shamas, I want you to have kavanah to be moitzi me, v'takali, and then blow. So I want you to have specific kavanah when you're blowing to be moitzi. Alma, you see from here. Kasovar, he holds, mashmiya boy kavanah. The person blowing has to have kavanah to be moitzi to shemeya. Meisber fake Gemara on Abzer. I'll prove that you're wrong. Oh, you over achar basic nesses. Oh, you show you basic samach basic nesses. If a person was walking behind the basic nesses or he lived near the basic nesses, our Mishnah, if the Shemeya had kavanah, he's yoytza. If the Shemeya didn't have kavanah, he's not yoytza. Correct the Gemara. Even if the Shemeya wanted to be yoytza, who said the blower is having kavanah to be moitzim? Hey, the person blowing might not have kavanah for him. And if you hold Reb Zera that the person blowing has to have kavanah to be moitzim, here he does not have kavanah to be moitzim. So how is it that he's yoytza? So the case of the Mishnah is not a guy blowing shofar in the Bismedish, it's the Baal Tekeya. The Baal Tekeya, when he blows, automatically he has kavanah to be moitzi anybody who's listening who wants to be yoytza. So therefore, not a question of safe, because there by default there's kavanah. But when you're just asking a private guy to blow for you, you have to make sure that he has kavanah to be moitzi. Tashma, nischaven shemeya v'loy nischaven mashmiya. What if the shemeya had kavanah, but the mashmiya didn't have kavanah? So the listener had kavanah, but the blower didn't have kavanah. Or niskaven mashmiya v'loy niskaven shemeya. Lo yotza achi yiskaven shemeya u'mashmiya. Both of them have to have kavanah. We learned this price on number Aleph or on number base. But katani mashmiya dima de shemeya. What exactly is the kavanah that the shemeya has to have to be yoytza? Well, the mashmiya also has to have kavanah to be yoytza himself when he blows. My shemeya la'atzmai, just like the kavanah that the shemeya has to have is that he should be yoytza himself. Af mashmiya la'atzmai. The mashmiya only has to have kavanah to be yoytza himself, but he doesn't have to have specific kavanah to be moitzi me. The katani lo yotza, only if he didn't have kavanah to be yoytza himself. But if he had kavanah to be yoytza himself, even if he didn't have kavanah to be moitzi me, I'm still yoytza. So you have a raya against Reb Zera. Reb Zera, why did you need the mashmiya? Why did you need your Baal Tekeya to have kavanah to be moitzi you? From here you see the Baal Tekeya only has to have kavanah to be yoytza himself. And for the Gamora Tanoihi, it's actually a machlokas Tanoihi. The Tanya we learned, shemeya la'atzmai. The shemeya has to listen to be yoytza himself. Mashmiya lefidarkai. And the mashmiya, the person who's blowing the shofar, just blows the shofar normally to be. He doesn't have to have kavanah to be moitzi the person who's listening. Amar Rabbi Yosy argues. The Tana Rabbi Yosy argues, and he says, when do you say the person who blows the shofar doesn't have any specific kavanah is the shliach tzibur? Because he automatically by default has kavanah to be moitzi everybody. The regular individual, the yachid will not be yoytza unless the person blowing shofar had specific havanan to be mighty the shemeya. And this is who Reb Zera holds like. Reb Zera holds like the sheet of Reb Yosy, even though there's a machlokes tanoim if that's true. And with this, we can finish. I just want to share a very cute little vart I heard on this week's parsha. All the way to the end of the parsha, not the last pasuk, but very close to the last pasuk. The Torah talks about Yaakov running to Lavan. And it says, Yaakov went to Lavan, Achosh Rivka, the brother of Rivka, Aim Yaakov Esav, the mother of Yaakov and Esav. That's a little bit too much information. And Rashi comments on that. I don't know what the Gamora said. I don't know what the pasuk was trying to teach us. I heard B'derech Tzachas a beautiful word. Yaakov was going to meet his uncle Lavan for the very first time of his life. And he needed to prepare some type of conversation to discuss with his uncle. But he didn't know what his uncle was interested in discussing. Does he like Torah? Does he like Lomdis, Hashkafa, politics, Latzonis, Lashon Hara, business, sports? What does he like to talk about? He had no idea. So he figured, let me use reverse engineering. I know there's a rule that Roim Bonim Halchin Achar Achayim. Most of the children of a woman are similar to her brother. So I'll reverse engineer this. Let me look at the children of this woman. Who are the children of this woman? Yaakov and Esav. And I'll see what their common themes are. And then I'll know what Lavan would be interested in. And that's Rashi. There's such a split here. Yaakov is here and Esav is there. I'm not getting any information from this reverse engineering.
Very good. I like that. Who said it?
I heard it over a couple of years ago. Rabbi Pakshu told it to me, but I don't know who he said it over from.
Shkach.
Shkoyach, good to know.
Shkoyach.